I wanted to talk about what I found to be one of the weirdest charities, and I'm going to be very, very specific here in saying that I love this charity for the most part, because I feel like it provides a lot. But there is such a weird logistical thing behind this charity that I don't fully understand. Today, I want to discuss the Okra Project, and if you want to look into it yourself, it's www.theokraproject.com. And I'm going to read what comes directly from their website to explain what this charity is. This is from their front page. The Okra Project is a collective that seeks to address the global crisis faced by Black trans people by bringing home-cooked, healthy, and culturally specific meals and resources to Black trans people wherever we can reach them. During the Middle Passage, our African ancestors snuck okra onto captive ships to sustain themselves and plant in the New World. Black diasporic cooking traditions often use the okra plant for its versatility and is often associated with health, prosperity, and community. In this spirit, the Okra Project hopes to extend free, delicious, nutritious meals to Black trans people experiencing food insecurity. How does it work? It's actually very simple. Based on individual donations, the Okra Project pays Black trans chefs to go into the homes of Black trans people to cook them a healthy and home-cooked meal at absolutely no cost to our Black TGNC siblings. I am not sure what TGNC is, and I apologize, but I would like to learn. For those Black trans folks currently experiencing homeless or whose homes cannot support our chefs' cooking, the Okra Project has partnered with institutions like Osborne Association and other community spaces to deliver foods. One session costs the Okra Project $90, including chef pay and groceries. Now look, again, I like the idea of this, but I'm very confused by this as a whole. And this is nothing too particular with saying that it's not a worthwhile charity. It's more so to say that this only feels like a quote-unquote applicable type of charity towards major giant cities in the Americas. Because the logistics behind this charity are exceptionally difficult to work out. Starting off with the simplest thing is that where do we find the chefs? The chefs have to be Black and trans. And then we have to find people who are food insecure, whom are also Black and trans. So we've created this weird scenario where we need to meet these two Black and trans people, one whom can provide the food and one whom is food insecure. Now, I do not know the statistics and what the average per capita of Black and trans individuals is, and this is why I'm creating this video, because I will come off as ignorant. That is one of the greatest intentions that I'm coming off with right now, is that I do not know these things. I would love to learn. I would love the opportunity for somebody to educate me, assuming that I don't. But I just want to run down the logistical confusion behind this and saying that we need to find the Black and trans individuals whom are cooks and chefs. And then we also need to create a partnership to then provide meals to these individuals. Now, let's say that they're homeless. And that's one thing that I can understand clearly is that being trans and being kicked out of your home, I've heard and seen some stories of that. I have understood that struggle because I've seen it firsthand. The idea that you can kick your own blood out of your house because they are trans just kind of confounds me to this day. But if you're removed and homeless, you then have to find a way to provide this person with food and then cook it for them. So at the cost of just getting it out of the way and trying to do an ABC list of this, I'm going to just explain my logistical confusions and problems with this charity. The first thing we have to do is find two Black and trans people. The second thing needs to be that one of them needs to be a chef. Preferably, I'm imagining they need to be food secure. And then we need to find another Black and trans person whom is food insecure. Going by, other than the major cities, if you were to exclude all the major cities that have a population of, let's say, maybe over 1 or 3 million people. How about 3 million? How many people then at that point would fall under the qualifications and the parameters of this charity? And then after that point, a session costs $90. So we're paying the chef and for the groceries to provide to the other person. Now, another logistical issue is that transportation. How do we transport the cook from A to B to the person's house or coordinating a communal space, which I do like that part because then it kind of creates a center point between two people. And that way one person's not driving out 10, 20 miles and therefore kind of making the expenses behind this really expensive. Then the chef then has to go and buy specific foods to then meet one of the idioms of the charity, which is that they're educating people on health, prosperity, community, and a lot of cultural foods. So then you also logistically have to find said foods in the local area, hoping that they have whatever those supplies may be, and if not, I imagine they just go to the next best thing, which is healthy foods, which almost any community has access to. And then you then have to have these two individuals then cooking for the other person. Well, what if the other person, you're going to their house and they don't have the equipment that a cook or a chef needs? You're kind of under a parameter of hoping that the person that is food insecure has to then have the equipment, or the person bringing the equipment. So there's a lot of equipment possibly moving and transporting, as well as the groceries. And then we're also paying the chef, and the chef, I would imagine, has to go get the groceries. Now, with all of that being said, my last logistical issue is the $90. $90 is a week to 2 weeks worth of food, depending on how many people. I'm like, for some people, $25 is a week worth of food. It seems really inefficient. This charity is so hyper-specific on a certain community of folk, and then the price of one session is at such a high value. Now, with my little listicle out of the way, and just trying to discuss the logistical issues I personally have with the charity, I find a couple of things here really fascinating. I want to be positive before I go into a couple more confusions here. Is that number one is that, in a kind of weird way, I love the idea of two trans individuals having the opportunity to kind of communicate, because when you're taking somebody like a chef, I mean, imagining that it's an experienced chef, and you're allowing the opportunity to really educate somebody else on healthy living and eating. Like, most chefs have this capacity where they can teach you how to find good deals on food, maybe how to cook healthier, how to just keep yourself going. Some people like myself, you living on not a lot of money, you can find ways to get discounts and cheap. And you kind of get a lifestyle in your mind where you can actually survive off of less money, and you're not going out and spending some crazy amount on stuff that isn't as healthy for you, or maybe you could extend the lifespan of your food because you're not buying more expensive stuff that's empty calories. You're kind of helping to destroy the food insecurity aspect of the charity. I really love that perspective. And one of the things that I love here that I haven't actually seen because I haven't looked into it yet, which is what are the cultural meals that are being taught. And if you watch my last video, you know I'm very much a fan of the idea of creating different communal foods, bringing cultures across the oceans and seas, and like, it's one of my favorite things that, like, we as a people have transcended food as like one of the greatest unifiers between our cultures and our societies. It's honestly my favorite thing as a cook that we do this, because it's just such an intrinsic thing to us, is to share our food and our culture with other people. We'd obviously want to take what we would consider the best from every culture, and I love the idea of bringing African cooking over here, because honestly, it is a really underserved market in the restaurant industry. And as far as I can tell, some of the Ethiopian cooking, like, it is so amazing looking, and I'm blown away that we don't have more of it over here. With all that said, again, you can look over on the okraproject.com if you are interested in contributing to this charity at all. And again, I am not necessarily bashing them. I'm just finding a lot of confusion in this charity. And with all of that, again, if you feel any need to educate me, or maybe we want to have a conversation on this, feel free to write in the comment section down below or hit me up on Twitter. I'm willing to talk more about this or expand more on this if anybody wants to talk about this, so feel free to hit me up. But now, why do I even make this video? Well, I'm going to express some opinions from this point on, so if you just wanted to hear what I was talking about and some of the confusions I'm having, that was the first part, and this is the part where I express more of my opinions and maybe some ways that the charity in of itself can improve. But I think there's two problems here with this entire charity. Is number one is the cost, and number two is just the targets of who they choose. Now, black trans chefs, I can imagine, is a very limited group, but they do exist, and there's a great number of people who are black and trans, and I can imagine there's a great number of people who are black and trans and food insecure. But you run through this logistical issue of trying to find people and then educate your chefs on this type of narrative you're trying to pursue. So we've kind of deviated a lot of confusion here, and I really like the idea of being like, well, we're trying to culturally educate somebody. I love that, but it doesn't fall in line with somebody being food insecure. And that's kind of where, like, my own personal gripe comes into play, is going, if you gave me $90 that was exclusively used for food, I may not be looking for the cultural aspect of my food. I'm looking for health, and I'm looking to expand that money as long as I can because I'm food insecure. So what am I doing? I am lowering my protein intake. I'm trying to fill up on carbs and starches. I'm trying to just keep my calories at the high end. So at what point do you sit there and go, well, culture needs to be a center point? Okra can be cheap, but it can also be brutally expensive. So that's one of the biggest complaints that I have just in general with the charity, is that it's like there's so many people that need to be taught how to eat and cook healthy. One of the biggest complaints I always hear from people is that, oh, healthy food's so expensive. And I constantly argue, it's not. I love going to Save-A-Lot. I'm cheap. I am a cheap dude. I go to Save-A-Lot. I go to Aldi's. I go and buy in bulk when I can, and I keep my expenses low. And I keep my caloric intake at a kind of high rate. But there's a certain luxury and complacency that's created when you don't have a lot of money and you just find out that ramen is the simple way, canned vegetables is the simple way. But when you have the ability to be given essentially $90 and you're given an educational lesson of how to best allocate that to keep that going for a long period of time, you can find out, wow, actually I can buy frozen vegetables. I can buy different types of canned foods that might have a longer shelf life. Oh, beans do exist. Like, you get this massive amount of education towards how to create food that will last you a long period of time. And I find that the paying the chef part is really interesting, because if you're going to argue like that you're doing this for charity, usually you get a tax incentive as doing this. So this could be a great incentive for if you are a chef and you're trying to get your taxes down. Well, you can say, I have proof here that says I worked for this charity and I didn't get paid. They quoted me at blank amount of hours. I believe you should be able to write that off as a taxable expense because you're doing charity work from I'm assuming, I don't exactly know, an accredited charity like the Okra Project. And if you're not, then yes, the pay makes sense because you're going, well, they're not officially written down as a charity, so I obviously would like to get paid for my time. I understand that. And then you just have to also find the individual whom is food insecure, and you have to hope that the person you're hiring is going to educate them. And to my knowledge, cooks are relatively smart. Like, I've worked in the restaurant industry for close to a decade. I love the people I worked with. But there are many of them who just don't know how to take care of themselves because they live in that environment. And the restaurant industry is simultaneously my favorite and the worst industry to ever work in. You have to really focus on who you're bringing into this project, because I've met people who have lived on ramen and smoked out of life, and they made 2 times more money than I did, but that's the way they live their life. And because it's consuming you in this industry to go, you got to go fast, we're moving fast. The restaurant industry is all about fast. You do not stop in the restaurant industry. So when you live in that world, you tend to find whatever the fastest thing is. McDonald's, ramen, you go fast. You throw things in steamers to just get it done real fast. And what does that entail? Frozen meat, highly processed foods, trans fats. And I'm hoping that if you're a properly educated chef, you understand how to stretch that dollar out. And I'm also hoping that you can teach the person whom is food insecure how to stretch that dollar out. And with all that being said, this is really meant to be open-ended. If you have any other charities like this, or maybe you know any charities that are maybe more effective at something like this, I'd love to know down below, because if it wasn't for this hyper-specific nature of this charity, I'd actually donate to this. I love the idea of donating to food banks, because you're just trading a product. You're just going, hey, I've got all this food here, and when you kind of live in this mindset of getting food from the food bank, you get to see where the priority is, the amount of beans that are transferred, the amount of canned food that are transferred. Like, there's a lot to learn from going to a food bank and finding out what they need, that people are underserved severely. And subsequently, you find out what are some of the things that people get that last them the longest, what keeps their calories going, what's proper nutrition, you're getting a proper balance of your vitamins and minerals. So I'm personally more of a fan of food banks, but I'm open to having some more charities like this exist, provided they maybe worked in tandem with something like a food bank. So if you have any suggestions, or if you know anybody down below, or any charities down below, like, please let me know. I'd love to know. This is a really cool start to some more niche types of charities, and I'd like to see where else people go with their minds. And like I've said before, if you want to discuss this further, please leave a comment in the comment section down below, or hit me up on Twitter, or send me a private DM, and maybe we can have a conversation like this on a video. So thank you for listening, and have a good day.